My name is Evelyn, and I'm 61 years old when this story begins. I've always thought of myself as a survivor. Life didn't hand me things on a silver platter. I had to work for every single comfort I had. I lost my husband, Thomas, to a sudden heart attack when I was only 33, and my daughter Clarissa was just 5 years old. From that day forward, I wore two hats, mother and father. I did the bedtime stories, the scraped knees, the late-night homework, the piano lessons, the college tuition. Every ounce of my being was poured into raising her, and I never once resented it. She was my world. Now, at 61, I had settled into a quieter life in my modest but cozy home. I loved gardening, baking, and reading in the evenings. Most of all, I loved when Clarissa would come by, her laughter filling the house just as it did when she was a child. She was 33 now, a marketing executive at a firm downtown, with a life I used to dream she'd have stable, independent, accomplished. When she introduced me to Travis, the man she said was the love of her life, I was genuinely thrilled for her. He was handsome in a clean-cut way, about 35, with that kind of easy smile that makes you want to trust someone. At least, that's how it seemed in the beginning. I welcomed him with open arms, made him dinner, and told Clarissa how happy I was that she had found someone. I thought, finally, she'll never be alone and maybe I won't either. But over time, something about Travis shifted. Or maybe I just started seeing what he really was. He'd interrupt me in conversation, correcting me over minor things as if I were a child. He'd roll his eyes when I told stories, even the ones that made Clarissa laugh. If I brought over a casserole, he'd make some joke about old-fashioned food. They weren't loud insults, but small cuts, over time, can bleed you dry. I told myself to ignore it. I didn't want to seem jealous or overbearing. I wanted Clarissa to be happy, and if that meant biting my tongue, then I would do it. But one evening, everything changed. It was a simple dinner at their house. Clarissa had invited me over for roast chicken, and I brought along a pie for dessert. The evening started well enough, a little wine, some light conversation. Clarissa seemed tired from work, but she was glowing in that way newlyweds do. After dinner, as I helped clear the plates, I stepped into the hallway for a moment to grab my sweater from the coat rack. That's when I heard it. Travis's voice, low but clear. "She's just dead weight, Clarissa. You know it." For a moment, I thought I misheard. My body froze, every nerve sharp as glass. Clarissa's voice came next, softer, uncertain. "Don't say that. She's my mother." But there was no outrage, no defense, no shutting him down. Just a weak protest, like she didn't quite disagree. Travis chuckled. "Come on, babe. She doesn't have much going on anymore. Always hanging around. You don't need the stress of looking after her. She should, I don't know, move into one of those retirement condos. Then we could really start our life." The words sank like stones in my chest. Dead weight. That's what I was to him. After everything I had sacrificed, after raising Clarissa on my own, I was nothing more than an anchor dragging their shiny new life down. I stepped back into the dining room, my face composed, though my insides were trembling. "I think I'll head home," I said softly. Clarissa looked surprised, maybe even a little guilty, but she didn't press me to stay. The car ride home was a blur. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, tears clouding my eyes, my chest aching with a pain deeper than I had ever known. I had been called many things in my life: strong, resilient, stubborn, but never useless. Never dead weight. That night, I sat at my kitchen table long after midnight, staring at the pie I had brought back untouched. My thoughts churned. Had Clarissa started seeing me this way too? Was I truly a burden in her eyes? Or was it just Travis, whispering poison into her ear until she couldn't tell the difference? I had always believed that no matter what, my daughter and I were unshakable. That bond forged in years of struggle couldn't be broken. But as the clock ticked on and the silence of the house pressed against me, I realized with a sinking heart that maybe, just maybe, I had been wrong. And I didn't yet realize how much colder things were about to get between me and the people I loved most. It's painful when love begins to feel like rejection. The morning after that dinner, I woke with puffy eyes and a heaviness that seemed stitched into my chest. I had always believed Clarissa and I were each other's home, that no matter where life carried us, we'd return to each other with open arms. But now, after hearing Travis's cruel words and seeing Clarissa's weak defense, I wasn't so sure anymore. At first, I tried to convince myself it had just been an ugly moment. People say hurtful things when they're stressed, right? Maybe Travis had been drinking. Maybe Clarissa didn't know what to say. Maybe. I clung to excuses, because the alternative was too painful to bear. The possibility that my daughter truly saw me as a burden. But over the next few weeks, the excuses stopped making sense. Clarissa's phone calls became shorter. Before, she'd call almost every evening just to chat about her day. About work gossip, about the silly TV shows we used to watch together. But now? Days passed without a single ring. When I finally called her, the conversations felt rushed, her voice distant. "Sorry, Mom, Travis and I are busy tonight," she'd say. Or, "Can I call you back later? I'm in the middle of something." The callbacks rarely came. Her visits grew rarer, too. We used to spend Saturday afternoons shopping at the farmer's market or cooking in my kitchen. But when I suggested it one weekend, she hesitated. "Travis and I are trying to use weekends for ourselves now. Maybe another time?" It stung, but I smiled through the phone. "Of course, honey. You deserve time together." Still, after hanging up, I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the 2 empty mugs I had set out in anticipation of her visit. When she did come by, Travis was almost always with her, and when he was there, it was as if a wall went up. If I spoke about my garden or a book I'd read, he'd glance at his phone or interrupt with some story about his work. He didn't listen, not really. And slowly, I realized Clarissa wasn't listening much either. One evening, as we sat together after dinner, Travis leaned back in his chair and said casually, "Evelyn, have you ever thought about moving into one of those retirement condos? They have activities, people your age, you'd never be lonely." I forced a smile. "I like my home. I've built my life here." He shrugged, almost dismissive. "Sure, but wouldn't it make sense? Less upkeep for you? And, well, Clarissa and I could really use the space here without worrying about you so much." Clarissa didn't object. She didn't even look up from her plate. The words lodged in my chest like a stone. Was that what they thought I was now, a responsibility to be managed, a problem to be solved? That night, I sat in my living room, staring at the photographs on the mantel. One was from Clarissa's college graduation. I remembered sitting in the bleachers, tears streaming down my face as she crossed the stage. I had worked 2 jobs to put her through school, sometimes skipping meals so she wouldn't have to. I had been her foundation, her rock. And now, somehow, in her husband's eyes, maybe even in hers, I was nothing more than a piece of dead weight. The silence in my house grew heavier. I began journaling again, something I hadn't done in years. Each night, I poured my heart onto paper, trying to untangle the hurt and confusion. "What did I do wrong?" I wrote one night. "Am I really so difficult to love now that she has him?" My friends noticed the change in me. At Sunday brunch, my longtime friend Nora reached across the table and said, "Evelyn, you've been quieter lately. Is something going on with Clarissa?" I hesitated, swallowing the lump in my throat. "She's busy with her new life. I don't want to get in the way." Nora gave me a knowing look. "You've given her everything. Don't let anyone make you feel like you're less than that." Her words warmed me, but they couldn't erase the ache in my chest. Even small kindnesses from strangers made me realize how invisible I felt at home. My neighbor, Mrs. Whitfield, often waved from her porch and dropped off cookies, saying, "It's nice having you around, Evelyn." A cashier at the grocery store remembered my name and asked about my garden. These gestures, tiny, fleeting, reminded me I wasn't invisible everywhere, just in the places that should have mattered most. But inside my family, I was fading. Holidays that once brought joy became strained. At Thanksgiving, Travis spent most of the meal on his phone, and Clarissa laughed politely at his dismissive jokes about old traditions. I tried to keep the atmosphere cheerful, but every laugh felt hollow, every smile forced. When they left that evening, I stood at the doorway watching their car pull away. For the first time, I didn't feel like family was leaving. I felt like outsiders had visited and I was the one left standing in the cold. The loneliness grew sharp. At night, I'd walk through the quiet house and feel like a ghost haunting my own life. I used to imagine that as Clarissa got older, she'd come closer to me, not farther away. That maybe, someday, I'd be the grandmother reading bedtime stories, baking cookies, filling a house with joy again. But now, that dream felt fragile, like glass slipping through my fingers. And worst of all, I began to fear something I had never considered before. What if my daughter didn't need me anymore? What if, in her eyes, I truly had become dead weight? But when money entered the conversation, the tension between us took on a darker, more dangerous edge. Greed has a way of exposing people's true colors. The tension in my relationship with Clarissa had been building slowly, like a storm gathering on the horizon. I felt it in the pauses of her phone calls, in the way Travis looked at me as though I were a guest overstaying my welcome. But it wasn't until one Sunday afternoon, over what was supposed to be a simple family lunch, that the storm broke open. I had invited them over for roast beef and mashed potatoes, one of Clarissa's childhood favorites. I wanted, desperately, to bring back some of the warmth we used to share. To remind her of simpler times when it was just the two of us laughing in the kitchen. The meal started pleasantly enough. Clarissa complimented the food, though distractedly, while Travis poured himself a generous glass of wine. We talked about her work, about Mason, her boss's new baby that she adored, and even about a TV show we both watched. For a little while, I let myself believe things were normal again. But as we moved into dessert, Travis leaned back in his chair, swirling his wine glass, and said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, "So, Evelyn, what are your plans with the house, long term?" The question seemed innocent enough on the surface, but his tone carried something else. A probing. A calculation. I blinked. My plans? Well, I'm not going anywhere anytime soon. This is my home. He chuckled, glancing at Clarissa. Of course. I just mean, eventually. It makes sense for us to inherit, right? I mean, it's a big house for one person. I felt the fork slip slightly from my hand. The casualness of his words was like a slap. I looked at Clarissa, expecting her to laugh it off, to change the subject, to say, "Travis, that's not appropriate." But she didn't. She just shifted uncomfortably, her eyes on her plate. "Travis," I said carefully, keeping my voice calm. "This house is mine, and I'll decide what happens to it when the time comes." He raised his eyebrows as if amused. "Sure, but come on. You don't really need much anymore. Clarissa and we're building a future. Kids, maybe a bigger place. It just seems logical. Houses like this don't come cheap these days." I swallowed hard. Logical. That's how he saw me, as a piece of property. A stepping stone for his ambitions. I tried to steer the conversation elsewhere, but Travis wasn't done. As I served him a slice of pie, he leaned forward with a grin. "And hey, not to be morbid, but that life insurance you've got? That's a solid retirement plan for us down the road. At least you've got your finances in order." For a moment, the room tilted. My pulse hammered in my ears. Did he just say that? My death reduced to a retirement plan? Clarissa looked up then, her cheeks flushed. "Travis, stop," she muttered. But there was no real bite in her voice. No outrage. I forced a brittle smile. "That's enough talk about money. Let's enjoy dessert." But inside, something cracked. Later that evening, after they left, Clarissa called me from her car. "Mom, I'm sorry about earlier. Travis can be blunt sometimes. He doesn't mean anything by it." "Doesn't mean anything by it?" I repeated, gripping the phone tightly. "Clarissa, he just reduced my life to dollars and cents. And you sat there." There was silence on the other end. Then she sighed. "He's just worried about our future. Finances are stressful. You don't understand the pressure we're under." I closed my eyes, my heart aching. Clarissa, I sacrificed everything for your future. I went without so you could have more. And now you're letting him talk about me like I'm already gone. Her voice softened, but it wasn't enough. Mom, please don't be upset. You know I love you. But did I know that anymore? That night, I pulled out the folder from my desk drawer, the one with my will, my life insurance, all the papers I had neatly organized years ago. I sat there, staring at it, my hands trembling. When I first wrote my will, I left everything to Clarissa. Who else would I leave it to? She was my daughter, my only family. But now, a new fear clawed at me. Was that all I was to her anymore? An inheritance? A house? A bank account? I pressed my hand to my chest, fighting back tears. For decades, I had been her mother, her provider, her safe place. But now, for the first time, I wondered if she saw me as nothing more than a safety net. I tucked the folder back into the drawer, locking it this time. But the thought refused to leave me. What if Travis was right? What if, in their eyes, my value had nothing to do with love and everything to do with what I could give them when I was gone? And that question haunted me, whispering doubts I couldn't silence, as I began to realize love and loyalty may not be as unshakable as I once believed. Sometimes one sentence can destroy years of love. The weeks following that unsettling Sunday lunch were a blur of uneasy silences and strained conversations. I tried to brush off Travis's tasteless remarks about inheritance and insurance, telling myself not to let one dinner ruin decades of love between me and my daughter. But deep down, the cracks were spreading. I could feel them widening every time Clarissa chose to defend her husband with excuses instead of defending me. It all came to a head one chilly Saturday evening. Clarissa had invited me to a small family gathering at their house. Just a few people, some of Travis's friends, a couple of colleagues, and me. I almost didn't go. My pride told me to stay home, but my heart, the part that still longed for my daughter's warmth, convinced me otherwise. When I arrived, the living room buzzed with conversation and laughter. Travis played the charming host, pouring drinks, clapping people on the back, telling exaggerated stories about work. Clarissa flitted around with hors d'oeuvres, her smile bright but tired. I sat quietly on the sofa, observing, trying to fit myself into this world that seemed less and less mine. When the plates were cleared and people migrated toward the kitchen, I followed to help. Old habits die hard. I gathered glasses, stacking them carefully, wanting to contribute. That's when it happened. As I reached for a tray, Travis blocked my path with a smirk. "Oh no, Evelyn," he said loud enough for everyone in the kitchen to hear. "You don't need to worry about that. You're just dead weight in this house." The words sliced through the air like a blade. A hush fell. One of his colleagues glanced awkwardly at the floor. Another gave a nervous laugh, unsure if it was a joke. I froze, the tray trembling in my hands. "Excuse me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Travis chuckled, taking the tray from me. "I mean, you don't have to fuss with things. You're our guest. Sit down, relax. Leave it to the younger ones." But his eyes, cold, mocking, told a different story. I looked at Clarissa, waiting for her to say something, to stand up for me, but she just gave a small, awkward laugh and said, "Travis doesn't mean it like that, Mom. Didn't mean it like that." The same tired excuse. The room seemed to spin. Heat rushed to my face, tears threatening to well. For 61 years I had endured loss, hardship, loneliness, but nothing had ever cut so deep as hearing my own daughter laugh off my humiliation. "I think I'll head home," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I set down the tray and walked out of the kitchen, out of the house, out into the cool night air. The drive home was a blur of headlights and tears. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I could barely see through the blur in my eyes. I stumbled inside, collapsed into a chair, and let the sobs come, the kind of sobs that shake your whole body, that leave you gasping for breath. I replayed the scene over and over, Travis's cruel smirk, the laughter of strangers, Clarissa's silence. The humiliation burned like fire. I thought of the years I had spent holding Clarissa's hand at the doctor's office, staying up late to help her with school projects, working double shifts to pay for her tuition. I had given her everything, my time, my energy, my love, and in return, she let a man call me dead weight in front of an audience. For the first time in my life, I felt something I had never allowed myself to feel toward my daughter. Resentment. I sat at the kitchen table until dawn, staring at the cold cup of tea I had made hours earlier. My heart ached with betrayal, but beneath the pain, a new feeling was growing resolve. I could no longer pretend things would get better on their own. I could no longer swallow the hurt just to keep the peace. My daughter had chosen silence, and silence was a choice. If I allowed them to continue treating me this way, I would spend the rest of my life shrinking into the shadows of their lives, unloved and unwanted. I had survived too much to let that be my ending. The next morning, I stood in front of the mirror, my face pale and tired, but my eyes sharp. No more, I whispered to my reflection. No more letting them treat me like I don't matter. It was then I decided I would not just reclaim my dignity, I would reclaim control of my life. And so I quietly began to plan my ultimate act of defiance. Power isn't always about money, it's about choice. The morning after that humiliating dinner, I woke with swollen eyes and an aching head. My body felt heavy, but my mind was sharper than it had been in years. Something had shifted inside me the moment Travis called me dead weight in front of strangers. It wasn't just about humiliation anymore, it was about survival, about dignity. I moved through the house that morning in silence, my slippers padding across the hardwood floor. Everywhere I looked were reminders of my sacrifices: Clarissa's childhood photos, her trophies on the shelves, the handprint painting she made in kindergarten that I had framed. My life had been devoted to raising her, giving her stability, love, and opportunities. And yet, here I was reduced to nothing but an inconvenience and a bank account in her husband's eyes. I couldn't erase the past, but I could control the future. That Monday, I made an appointment with my lawyer, Mr. Donnelly. He had been with me since Thomas passed away, a kind, gray-haired man with a steady voice and a calm presence that always reassured me. Sitting in his office, I felt my nerves settle for the first time in weeks. "Evelyn," he said gently as he flipped through my file, "you've had your will in place for quite some time. You left everything to Clarissa. Do you want to make adjustments?" I hesitated, twisting the edge of my handkerchief in my lap. "Yes, I want to make significant changes." He looked up, studying me. "May I ask why?" For a moment, my voice caught in my throat. Then I took a deep breath. "Because my daughter has allowed her husband to treat me with cruelty. I don't want the things I've worked my entire life for, my house, my savings, to become a prize for someone who sees me as worthless. If Clarissa chooses to stand by that man, then I must protect myself." Mr. Donnelly nodded slowly, his expression sympathetic but professional. "That's not uncommon, Evelyn. More parents than you'd think find themselves in this situation. You're not alone in this." The tears I had been holding back pricked at my eyes. "I don't want to punish her. I just want peace. I want my legacy to reflect my values, not feed the greed of someone who despises me." He leaned forward. "Then we'll redirect your assets. Do you have anyone in mind?" I thought of the people who had shown me kindness without expecting anything in return. My close friend Nora, who had stood by me since high school. The local church, where I had found comfort during lonely nights. The animal shelter down the road, where I sometimes volunteered. These were the places and people who had given me something real, not just taken from me. "Yes," I said firmly. "I want to leave the majority to charities that matter to me, a portion to friends who have stood by me, and not a cent to Clarissa and her husband." The words surprised me as they left my mouth. They were sharp, final, but they felt right. "Mr. Donnelly made notes, his pen scratching across the paper. "It's your decision. And it's a powerful one. Are you sure?" I straightened my shoulders. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. When the papers were ready, he slid them across the desk. My hands trembled slightly as I picked up the pen. For a moment, I hesitated, the weight of decades pressing down on me. Then I signed, my signature looping across the page like a declaration of freedom. As the ink dried, I felt something inside me lift a burden I hadn't realized I was carrying. For the first time in years, I wasn't just reacting to what others did to me. I was making a choice for myself. Walking out of that office, the late afternoon sun warmed my face. The city hummed with life around me, cars honking, people laughing, footsteps on the pavement, but inside, I felt still, strong. Free. I didn't tell Clarissa. Not yet. Timing would matter. If she found out too soon, the explosion would be catastrophic. No. I would wait. I would let her show me who she truly was before I revealed the truth. That evening, as I sat in my kitchen sipping tea, I thought about what I had done. A pang of guilt pierced me, a mother's guilt, deep and instinctive. Was I betraying my daughter by cutting her out? Or was I protecting myself from the betrayal that had already happened? I closed my eyes and pictured Travis's sneer, the way Clarissa had laughed nervously instead of defending me. The guilt eased. I wasn't betraying anyone. I was standing up for myself. In the days that followed, I carried a quiet strength. When Clarissa called, I kept the conversations light, never hinting at the truth. I listened to her talk about work, about dinner parties, about trivial things that no longer seemed to include me. I smiled through the phone, but inside, I knew I had reclaimed something precious: control. At night, I slept more soundly than I had in months. For years, I had feared what would happen if I became too much of a burden, too much of a problem. But now, I realized the truth. I didn't need their approval, their money, their pity. I only needed my own courage, and I had finally found it. But secrets like these don't stay hidden forever, and when mine came to light, the storm it unleashed would be unlike anything I had ever faced. Greedy eyes always notice when something changes. For weeks after I signed the new will, I lived with a secret burning quietly in my chest. Every time I saw Clarissa and Travis, I carried it like hidden armor, invisible but strong. They still believed the future was neatly laid out for them, that my house, my savings, my life itself would one day belong to them, and I let them believe it. But secrets have a way of stirring suspicion, especially when people are looking for weaknesses to exploit. Clarissa was the first to notice something had shifted. She came by one afternoon, unannounced, holding a bag of groceries. "I thought we could cook together, like old times," she said, with a bright smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. We set about making pasta, chopping vegetables side by side. But I could feel her watching me more than usual, her eyes flicking toward the desk in the corner, where my locked drawer held the updated will. She asked too many questions, her tone casual but probing. "So, Mom, have you been to see Mr. Donnelly lately? You know, your lawyer?" I kept my face neutral as I sliced tomatoes. "I did, just some routine updates. Everyone my age should keep their paperwork in order." Her knife paused mid-chop. "Routine updates?" "Yes," I said, smiling faintly. "It's good practice." She didn't push further, but I could see the doubt flicker across her face. A week later, I caught Travis snooping. I had stepped out to tend the garden, and when I came back inside, I found him in my study, rifling through a stack of envelopes on the desk. "Looking for something?" I asked, my voice sharp. He straightened quickly, plastering on a grin. "Oh, just wanted to see if you had the number for that contractor you mentioned. Thought maybe it was here." The lie was obvious, but I said nothing. Instead, I walked over, slid the papers neatly back into place, and locked the drawer right in front of him. His smile faltered, just for a second. From then on, their behavior changed. Phone calls grew more frequent, but they weren't the warm check-ins of the past. Instead, they were laced with carefully worded questions. "How's your health these days, Mom?" Clarissa would ask. "Have you been to the doctor recently? Everything okay with your blood pressure?" Or Travis would chime in, "Ever think about downsizing? It'd be so much easier for you, and safer too. Big houses are a lot for someone your age." Every question felt less like concern and more like an interrogation. One evening, Clarissa invited me over for dinner. As we sat at the table, Travis poured me a glass of wine, his smile too wide. "So, Evelyn," he began smoothly, "hypothetically, if something happened to you tomorrow, everything would go to Clarissa, right?" The fork in my hand clattered against the plate. Clarissa's face flushed. "Travis," she hissed. "What?" he said innocently, lifting his hands. "It's a normal question. Families should talk about these things." I set the fork down and looked him squarely in the eye. "No, Travis. Families should talk about love, about respect, not about what they'll get when someone dies." The room went silent. His jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. Clarissa cleared her throat and tried to change the subject, but the damage was done. After that night, I knew they suspected. I could see it in the way they looked at me, not just as a mother or a mother-in-law, but as a vault they were afraid was closing before they could reach inside. The phone calls turned into unexpected visits. They'd drop by with excuses, "We were just in the neighborhood," or "We thought you might be lonely." But their eyes always lingered too long on the desk drawer, on the safe in the hallway closet, on the locked cabinet in the bedroom. One afternoon, I caught Clarissa standing by my study door, her hand on the knob. When she realized I was behind her, she jumped. "Oh, I was just looking for the bathroom," she said quickly, even though she had been in this house her entire life. I wanted to scream, to demand why my own daughter was snooping in my home, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I simply said, "You know where the bathroom is, Clarissa." Her cheeks burned, and she hurried away. At night, I lay awake, the ceiling looming above me. Part of me ached with sorrow. How had it come to this? How had my only child become a stranger who saw me as an obstacle to wealth instead of a mother to be cherished? But another part of me felt stronger, fiercer. They could pry, they could snoop, they could circle me like vultures, but I held the power now. My choices were locked away in that drawer, sealed with ink and intention. They couldn't touch them. Still, I knew it was only a matter of time before the truth came out. Secrets this heavy don't stay hidden forever. And when they did finally discover what I had done, I knew the explosion would shatter everything between us. And soon enough, the confrontation I had been dreading came crashing into my life in one brutal evening. The masks came off in one brutal evening. The tension had been simmering for weeks, thick in the air every time I saw Clarissa and Travis. They suspected something, though they hadn't confirmed it. Their probing questions, their wandering eyes, their sudden check-in visits, all of it pointed to one thing. They knew something had changed. I had been bracing myself for the inevitable, but nothing prepared me for how it finally happened. It was a Tuesday evening, gray and rainy, when they showed up at my door. I hadn't invited them. The doorbell rang, sharp and insistent, and when I opened it, there they were, Clarissa pale, her jaw tight, and Travis with that familiar smirk twisted into something harder. "Mom, we need to talk," Clarissa said without preamble. I stepped aside reluctantly, letting them in. The warmth of my home suddenly felt stifling as they sat across from me in the living room. I folded my hands in my lap, waiting. Travis wasted no time. "We know you've been to your lawyer," he said. His tone clipped. Clarissa saw the envelope. "What changes did you make to your will?" My heart thudded, but my voice was calm. "That's none of your concern." His eyes narrowed. "None of our concern? Evelyn, you're her mother. We are your family. Of course it concerns us." "No," I said firmly, meeting his gaze. "My estate. My choices. They're mine alone. Family doesn't get to dictate that." Clarissa shifted uneasily. "Mom, please don't make this harder than it has to be. Travis just wants to make sure everything is fair." "Fair?" I laughed bitterly. "Do you think it's fair that your husband calls me dead weight in my own home? Do you think it's fair that he reduces my life to a retirement plan for you two?" Clarissa's face flushed. He meant every word." I snapped, my voice trembling with anger I had held in for far too long. "And you let him. You let him humiliate me, dismiss me, treat me like I was nothing. You didn't defend me, Clarissa. Not once." Her lips parted, but no words came out. Silence filled the room, heavy and suffocating. Travis leaned forward, his voice low and sharp. So that's it, then? You've cut her out of the will? After everything she's done for you? After all the sacrifices we've made? I barked out a laugh, incredulous. Sacrifices you've made? What sacrifices, Travis? Living in your comfortable house? Eating the meals I cook when I come over? Mocking me behind my back? You've sacrificed nothing. His face darkened, his jaw clenched. You're being selfish, Evelyn. Spiteful. You know Clarissa deserves everything you've built. She's your daughter. I turned to Clarissa, my chest aching. Do you believe that, Clarissa? Do you believe you deserve what I've worked for just because you're my daughter? Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. I just thought, you always said everything you did was for me. The pain in her voice cut me, but I couldn't bend now. Not after everything. I raised you, Clarissa. I gave you love, safety, education. I gave you everything a mother could give. But love doesn't mean entitlement. Respect matters more than inheritance. And you let a man treat me like dirt under his shoes without so much as a word in my defense. She buried her face in her hands. And for a moment, I thought I saw the little girl she used to be, the one who used to cling to me after nightmares, whispering, "Don't leave me, Mommy." But then Travis stood, his voice booming. "This is insane. You're letting bitterness guide you. You'll regret this, Evelyn. People will think you've lost your mind. Cutting your only daughter out like that. Do you really want to die alone?" The words sent a shiver through me, not because they scared me, but because they revealed the truth I had suspected all along. He wasn't worried about me. He was worried about losing control. About losing access to what he thought was his. I rose slowly. My legs trembling, but my voice steady. "Get out of my house!" Clarissa looked up, shocked. "Mom, get out." My tone was sharp, unyielding. Travis sneered, grabbing his coat. "Fine. But don't come crying to us when you realize you made the biggest mistake of your life." He stormed toward the door. But Clarissa lingered. Her eyes were red, her face pale. "Mom, please," she whispered. "Can't we fix this?" I softened just slightly, but only for her. "Clarissa, I will always love you. But I won't let anyone, not even you, strip me of my dignity. This is my decision. And it's final." Her shoulders sagged as if I had struck her. Slowly, she turned and followed Travis out the door. The moment the door shut behind them, my knees buckled, and I sank onto the couch. My body shook with a mix of rage, grief, and relief. The silence of the house wrapped around me. But this time, it didn't feel like weakness. It felt like strength. For the first time in months, I wasn't the one shrinking, apologizing, or making excuses. I had stood up for myself, and though it hurt, it felt right. I stared at the door where they had stood, knowing a chapter of my life had closed forever. But endings have consequences, and this one was about to ripple far beyond my front door. Silence can be louder than words. The night of the confrontation replayed in my mind like a broken record. Travis's sneer, Clarissa's tear-filled eyes, the sharp slam of the door as they left, the images clung to me even as days passed. I told myself I was relieved, proud even, for standing my ground. But the silence that followed was its own kind of punishment. For the first few days, my phone didn't ring. I expected Clarissa to call, to apologize, to at least check in, but nothing came. I stared at the phone, willing it to buzz, convincing myself she was just waiting for the right moment. By the end of the week, I realized the truth. She wasn't calling. When the loneliness became unbearable, I tried calling her myself. The first time, she didn't answer. The second, she picked up, but her voice was flat. "What is it, Mom?" she asked. The word mom sounded cold, stripped of warmth. "I just wanted to hear your voice," I said quietly. She sighed. "I'm busy. Can we talk later?" But later never came. The silence grew heavier with each passing day. My house, once filled with Clarissa's laughter, now echoed only with my own footsteps. The walls seemed to close in, pressing against me, reminding me of everything I had lost. It wasn't long before the whispers began. My neighbor, Mrs. Whitfield, stopped by with a casserole, her expression gentle but probing. "I heard there was some trouble with Clarissa," she said carefully. "Is everything all right?" I forced a smile. "Families fight, we'll be fine." But I could see the doubt in her eyes. Soon, even church acquaintances approached me after service. Their voices hushed. "I heard Clarissa and Travis aren't speaking to you. That must be hard." I nodded, keeping my chin high, though inside I felt raw and exposed. Word travels fast in small communities, and I hated being the subject of gossip. Then came the rumors. I learned through Nora that Travis had been telling people I was losing it. According to him, I was senile, forgetful, irrational, incapable of making sound decisions. "He's poisoning her against you," Nora said, her eyes blazing with anger. "I know," I whispered, my hands trembling around my teacup. The thought that my daughter might believe him gnawed at me. Had she already chosen his side completely? Did she see me as unstable, untrustworthy as the bitter old woman he painted me to be? Clarissa's texts became shorter, colder. "Hope you're well. Busy this week. Talk later." Each one felt like a knife. A reminder that our bond was unraveling thread by thread. I tried to busy myself. I joined a church group, went on walks with Nora, tended my garden with renewed vigor. I reminded myself I wasn't alone, that people cared. But when I came home, the quiet still pressed in, reminding me that the one person who should have cared most had turned away. At night, I would walk through the living room, tracing my fingers along the frames of Clarissa's childhood photos. There she was at 5, holding her first teddy bear. At 10, grinning with missing teeth. At 18, in her graduation gown. Memories of love, joy, sacrifice, all staring back at me like ghosts. Had I lost her forever? Sometimes, guilt threatened to drown me. Had I gone too far by cutting her out of the will? Was there still a chance to fix things if I reversed my decision? But then I remembered Travis's voice, dripping with contempt. "You're just dead weight." No. I couldn't go back. Not now. Not after everything. Still, the ache of estrangement cut deep. Friends told me I was strong, that I had done the right thing. But strength doesn't erase the sting of being unwanted by your own child. The weeks turned into months. The distance grew. I began to ask myself a question that terrified me. Who am I, if not Clarissa's mother? For so long, my identity had been wrapped around her. Raising her, loving her, protecting her. With her gone, with that bond severed, I felt adrift, unmoored. One night, after yet another silent dinner at my empty table, I stood at the window and watched the lights flicker on in my neighbors' houses. Families gathered, laughter spilling out into the evening air. And in my chest, a hollow ache grew. But even as tears stung my eyes, a thought emerged, faint, fragile, but insistent. Maybe I wasn't meant to be only a mother anymore. Maybe I could be something more. And soon, I would discover the truth of that thought in the form of an unexpected friendship that would change everything. Sometimes, family finds you when you least expect it. Loneliness has a way of making the world feel smaller. My days blurred together, mornings in the garden, afternoons with a book, evenings with the television humming in the background. The silence that once comforted me now felt like a heavy blanket pressing down, suffocating me. It was on one of those quiet mornings, while I was pulling weeds by the front gate, that I first met Julia. She had just moved into the house across the street, a modest little place with a peeling fence and a yard that had been neglected for years. She was struggling with a bag of groceries while wrangling a squirming toddler in her arms. I set down my trowel and hurried over. "Here, let me help you," I said, reaching for the bag before it tumbled from her grip. Her face lit up with gratitude. "Oh, thank you. I didn't realize moving in with a 2-year-old would be such a circus." The little boy squirmed free and darted onto the lawn, giggling. Julia laughed breathlessly. "Mason, slow down, buddy. I couldn't help but smile. He's adorable. That was the beginning. Over the next few weeks, we saw more of each other. I brought her a pie as a welcome gift. She brought me fresh muffins one morning in return. Sometimes we'd sit on her porch, sipping coffee while Mason toddled around the yard. Julia was 28, warm and quick to laugh, with a strength in her eyes that spoke of hard-earned resilience. One afternoon, as Mason napped inside, Julia told me her story. She was a single mother. Mason's father had walked out before he was born, leaving her to figure everything out on her own. "It's been hard," she admitted, her voice low. "But worth it. He's my whole world." I nodded, understanding that sentiment more than she knew. I raised my daughter alone too. It's not easy. But the love makes it possible. She smiled softly. Then, from then on, our bond deepened. Mason took to me quickly, toddling over with sticky fingers to tug at my hand. I found myself laughing again, reading him stories, teaching him how to pat soil around flower beds. For the first time in months, my house echoed with the sound of a child's laughter. It filled a void I hadn't realized was so deep. Julia often told me how much she appreciated my help. "You don't know what it means to me, Evelyn," she said one evening as we washed dishes together. "Most days it feels like I'm running on fumes. Having you around, it's like having a mom again." Her words caught me off guard. My throat tightened, but I smiled. "And it feels like having a daughter again." We fell into an easy rhythm. Mason would run into my arms when he saw me, calling me Nana without anyone teaching him to. Julia encouraged it. And though it made me ache for Clarissa, it also healed me in ways I hadn't expected. For the first time since the confrontation, I felt needed not as a burden, but as a blessing. Still, there were moments when the past crept in. One evening, as I tucked Mason into bed while Julia finished some work in the kitchen, he looked up at me with wide eyes and said, "Nana, don't go." The words pierced me, reminding me of Clarissa as a child, clinging to me after a nightmare. For a moment, grief and joy collided inside me. I kissed Mason's forehead and whispered, "I'm not going anywhere." Later, when Julia came to check on him, she found me lingering in the doorway. Tears in my eyes. She placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "You've given us more than you know, Evelyn. You're family to us now." Family. The word wrapped around me like a balm. I realized then that blood wasn't the only thing that made family. Respect, kindness, love freely given, those were the bonds that mattered most. As the weeks turned into months, my house grew warmer again. Julia and Mason filled it with laughter, with life. Holidays no longer loomed like painful reminders of what I'd lost. Instead, I found myself baking cookies with Mason, helping Julia hang lights, carving pumpkins in the fall. Neighbors began to notice too. "Looks like you've got your hands full with that little one," Mrs. Whitfield teased one afternoon. I smiled. "I don't mind one bit." Inside, I felt something stir hope. Perhaps I hadn't lost everything. Perhaps life had simply redirected me toward a different kind of love. But even as I embraced this new chapter, a part of me still longed for Clarissa. Every time I heard Mason call me Nana, my heart swelled and broke at the same time. I wondered if my daughter ever thought of me late at night. If she regretted the silence between us. I didn't know the answer. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting by the phone, desperate for her call. I had found something unexpected, something real. And as I sat on Julia's porch one evening, Mason curled against my side as the sun dipped below the horizon, I realized something profound. Life had given me a second chance at family. But fate wasn't finished with me yet, because soon, Clarissa would reappear, and her desperation would shake the fragile peace I had built. Regret always comes knocking too late. The knock came on a quiet Sunday afternoon. I was in the kitchen with Julia and Mason, helping him spread frosting on a batch of cookies. The little boy's face was smeared with sugar, and Julia and I were laughing at his sticky fingers when the sharp rap on the door cut through the warmth. Something about the sound made my stomach drop. When I opened the door, my heart clenched. Clarissa stood there, pale and exhausted, her hair pulled back carelessly, dark circles shadowing her eyes. She looked nothing like the confident woman I had raised. "Mom," she whispered, her voice trembling. For a moment, words failed me. I wanted to embrace her, to hold her like I used to. But the memory of her silence, of her complicity in Travis's cruelty, kept my arms stiff at my sides. "Come in," I said softly. She stepped inside, glancing at Julia and Mason, who quickly excused themselves to the backyard to give us privacy. We sat at the table. Clarissa's hands twisted together nervously. I know I don't deserve to be here," she began, her voice breaking. "But I didn't know where else to go." I folded my hands, waiting. "Travis and I." Her words caught in her throat. "It's falling apart, Mom. Everything. He's been reckless with money, investing in stupid schemes, and now we're drowning in debt. He's angry all the time. He yells, he blames me. He's even threatened to leave." Tears spilled down her cheeks. And for a moment I saw my little girl again. The one who used to run to me after scraping her knee. "I should have defended you," she sobbed. "I should never have let him talk to you that way. I let him poison me against you, and I hate myself for it." My chest ached. Part of me wanted to reach across the table and wipe away her tears, to tell her everything would be all right. But another part, the part still raw with betrayal, held back. "I appreciate your honesty, Clarissa," I said carefully. "But why now? Why come to me after all this time?" Her eyes flickered, with guilt. Because I don't know what to do. I'm scared. And I thought maybe if we could fix things between us, we could figure out the future together." The implication hung heavy in the air. "The future," I repeated slowly. She swallowed hard. "I know you changed your will. Travis found out. And he's furious. But I don't care about him anymore. I don't want to lose you, Mom. And if there's any way to fix it." The words sliced me open. Was this really about reconciliation or about money? I leaned back in my chair, studying her. "Clarissa, do you love me? Or do you love what I can give you?" Her face crumpled. "Of course I love you. You're my mother. I made mistakes, I know that. But I'm trying to make things right." "Then why," I asked softly, "is the first thing you bring up my will?" She had no answer. Her tears fell harder, her hands covering her face. I wanted to believe her, to believe that beneath the desperation was genuine remorse. But doubt gnawed at me. "Clarissa," I said gently, "I can't promise you money. I can't promise you houses or inheritance. What I can offer is love, if you truly want it. But love isn't about conditions. You need to understand that." Her hands lowered, her eyes red and swollen. "I do. I swear I do." But the hesitation in her voice told me otherwise. When she finally stood to leave, I walked her to the door. She hugged me, clinging tightly. For a moment, my arms instinctively wrapped around her. The familiar warmth stirring memories of better days. But when she pulled away, the emptiness returned. As I watched her walk down the path, shoulders slumped, I felt torn in two. My heart longed to believe her, to welcome her back without hesitation. But my mind, scarred by months of betrayal, warned me not to be fooled by desperation disguised as love. That night, as I sat alone in the quiet, I whispered into the darkness, "Do I still have a daughter? Or just a stranger wearing her face?" And once again, my heart wrestled between love and self-preservation, unsure which side would win. Strength is saying no, even when it breaks your heart. After Clarissa's visit, the silence between us didn't last long. Within a week, she began showing up at my door again, sometimes with flowers, sometimes with takeout, sometimes just with a trembling smile that reminded me of the little girl I once knew. Part of me ached with joy each time I saw her. Another part braced for the inevitable questions that always lurked beneath the surface. At first, she seemed genuine. She apologized often, told me she missed me, shared stories about her work. We even cooked together once, and for a fleeting hour, I felt like things were almost normal. But then, as the dishes dried in the rack, her voice shifted. "Mom," she began carefully. "About the will. Have you thought any more about changing it back?" The warmth drained from the room. I sighed. "Clarissa, we've talked about this. My decision was final." Her smile faltered, replaced by a flash of desperation. "But things are different now. Travis is gone. It's just me. Don't I deserve another chance?" My throat tightened. "You deserve my love, Clarissa. You always have that. But money? Houses? That's not what defines us." Her eyes filled with frustration. "Easy for you to say when you already have everything." "I'm drowning, Mom, and you're just sitting here in this big house all alone." The words stung, but I forced myself to stay calm. "This house isn't a burden, it's my home, and I won't let guilt decide who gets it when I'm gone." Her lips pressed into a thin line, and she left without another word. But she came back again. And again. Each visit followed the same pattern. Warmth at first, then pressure. She would reminisce about childhood memories, laugh with me, even hug me tightly. But, eventually, the questions came. "Couldn't we meet with the lawyer together? What harm would it do to reconsider? Don't you want to make sure I'm taken care of when you're gone?" Every time, I felt my resolve waver. Every time, I reminded myself why I had made the decision in the first place. One evening, after another difficult visit, I sat with Julia on her porch while Mason played with toy trucks at our feet. "She keeps coming back," I confessed, my voice heavy. "Part of me wants to give in. To rewrite everything again just to make her happy." Julia shook her head firmly. "Don't. Evelyn, I've watched you these past months. You finally started living for yourself. Don't throw that away because she can't see past her own desperation." I swallowed hard. "But she's my daughter." "She is," Julia agreed softly. "But being your daughter doesn't give her the right to manipulate you. You deserve respect, not conditions on love." Her words anchored me. The next time Clarissa showed up, I was ready. She came in with a smile and a casserole dish. "I thought we could eat together," she said brightly. We did. We laughed, we reminisced, and for a little while, it felt like old times. But I could see it in her eyes the moment the conversation shifted. "Mom," she said gently as she set down her fork, "you know I love you. You know I regret everything. Can't you just reconsider, please? You don't know how much this would help me." I set my fork down too, folding my hands. My voice was steady, though my heart raced. "Clarissa, I love you. That will never change. But my will is not about you anymore. It's about protecting myself. It's about leaving a legacy that reflects respect, not greed." Her face tightened. "So that's it? You're really going to cut me out? Your only child?" Tears welled in my eyes. "You cut yourself out, Clarissa. The day you chose silence when he called me dead. Wait, the day you let money mean more than love. That was your choice. This," I gestured toward the locked drawer where the papers sat, "is mine." She stared at me, stunned, her lips trembling. For a moment I thought she might argue, might scream, might plead. But instead her face hardened. "Fine," she whispered. "If that's how you want it." She stood abruptly, grabbing her coat, and stormed out the door. I sat there long after the sound of her car faded, tears streaming down my face. Saying no to her was the hardest thing I had ever done. Every instinct in me screamed to protect her, to ease her pain. But I knew giving in would mean betraying myself. That night, I sat by the window, watching the stars flicker in the darkness. For the first time, I felt the full weight of what it meant to stand firm. It wasn't just about strength. It was about heartbreak. About letting go of the idea that love always wins. But as painful as it was, I knew I had done the right thing. And though the final wall between me and my daughter had been built, I also knew peace real, lasting peace was finally within my reach. Sometimes freedom comes dressed as loneliness. After Clarissa stormed out that night, the silence in my house felt heavier than ever. But something about it had changed. It wasn't the suffocating silence of guilt or fear anymore. It was the quiet of finality, of choices made and boundaries drawn. For the first time in years, I felt like I was living on my own terms. At first, I grieved. I cried into my pillow at night, mourning the daughter I once knew. The memories of her as a child haunted me, her small hand in mine, her laughter echoing through the house, the way she used to say, "Don't leave me, Mommy." Those images hurt in a way nothing else could. But slowly, grief gave way to something else: determination. I began to fill my days with things I had long neglected. I dusted off the set of paints I hadn't touched in decades. The first strokes were shaky, uneven, but soon, colors began to bloom on the canvas. It felt like breathing life back into a part of myself I had forgotten. I took long walks through the nearby park, breathing in the fresh air, feeling my body grow stronger with every step. I even joined a book club at the library, where I met other women my age who carried their own stories of loss and resilience. With Julia and Mason nearby, my house was no longer just mine. Their laughter filled the rooms, their presence warmed the spaces that had once felt cold. Mason would often tug at my sleeve, begging me to play trains with him, and I'd happily crawl on the floor, pretending to be the conductor. Julia and I would cook together, sharing recipes and secrets, building a bond that felt as natural as family. For the first time since Thomas's death, I felt truly alive again. The bitterness that had lived inside me for months began to fade. It didn't disappear. The wound with Clarissa was still there, still raw, but it no longer consumed me. I could look at her photographs on the mantel without breaking down. I could remember the good without being crushed by the bad. One afternoon, as I sat in the garden painting the roses, Julia came over with lemonade. "You seem lighter these days," she said, smiling. I set down my brush, looking at the canvas. "I think I finally realized something, Julia. For so long I defined myself only as a mother. My whole world was Clarissa. But I'm more than that. I'm a friend, a neighbor, a painter, a woman who still has a lot of living to do." Julia squeezed my hand. "And you're a Nana to Mason." My eyes filled with tears, but this time they were happy ones. "Yes, that too." I realized then that family doesn't always come from blood. Sometimes it finds you in unexpected ways, through kindness, through shared laughter, through mutual respect. Julia and Mason had become the family I didn't know I needed. As the seasons changed, so did I. I started volunteering at the animal shelter, walking dogs and cuddling kittens. The staff welcomed me with open arms, grateful for the help. The animals filled my heart with joy, their unconditional affection reminding me that love didn't have to come with strings attached. Neighbors noticed the change in me. "You look happier, Evelyn," Mrs. Whitfield said one morning as she handed me fresh bread from her oven. "Whatever you're doing, keep at it," I smiled. "I'm just living again." Nights were no longer filled with regret. Instead, I would curl up with a book, sip chamomile tea, and feel a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. I was no longer haunted by Travis's cruel words, no longer defined by Clarissa's silence. I was defined by me. I knew the wound with my daughter might never heal completely. I accepted that now. But I also knew that I had done the right thing by standing firm, by refusing to let myself be treated as dead weight. I wasn't dead weight. I was alive, strong, and worthy. The freedom I found came with loneliness, yes. There were still nights when I wished Clarissa would call, when I longed to hear her voice without the edge of desperation. But I no longer lived in the shadow of that longing. I had built something new, something whole. And as I stood in my garden one evening, the sky painted with streaks of orange and pink, I felt a quiet gratitude. Life had taken things from me, yes, but it had also given back. And just when I thought the chapter was closed, destiny handed me one last surprise in the form of a letter that would change everything. Not all endings are as final as they seem. It was a gray Thursday morning when the letter came. I hadn't been expecting anything in the mail beyond the usual bills and advertisements, but there it was, a plain white envelope with my name written in familiar, slanted handwriting, Clarissa's handwriting. My hands trembled as I carried it inside, setting it on the kitchen table as though it were a fragile relic. I stared at it for a long time, my heart thudding in my chest. Part of me wanted to rip it open immediately, desperate for her words. Another part wanted to shove it in a drawer and forget it existed, too afraid of what it might say. Finally, I made myself a cup of tea, sat down, and carefully slid my finger under the flap. The paper inside was lined, torn from a notebook, and the first line made my breath hitch. Dear Mom, I don't know how to begin, except to say I'm sorry. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. I forced myself to keep reading. She wrote about Travis first. How their marriage had officially ended, how she had moved out after one last explosive fight. She admitted he had been manipulative, cruel, and reckless with money, but she also admitted something that broke me. I let him poison me against you. I stood by while he disrespected you, and worse, I let myself believe you were the problem. That is the greatest regret of my life. My hands shook as I turned the page. She didn't ask for money. Not once. She didn't mention the will or the house or inheritance. Instead, she wrote about missing me. Missing us. I walk past places we used to go together and I feel like a piece of me is gone. I don't want to lose you forever, Mom. Please, if there's still a part of you that wants me in your life, give me another chance. By the time I reached the end, love always Clarissa, my cheeks were wet with tears. I set the letter down and pressed it to my chest. My emotions tangled into a knot. Relief, sorrow, hope, and doubt all mixed together. Julia found me like that an hour later when she came by with Mason. She took one look at my face and asked softly, "What happened?" Wordlessly, I handed her the letter. She read it carefully, her brow furrowed, then looked up at me. "How do you feel?" I laughed bitterly through my tears. Like our heart's been split in two. I've wanted this for so long for her to admit she was wrong, but I don't know if I can trust it. Julia placed the letter back on the table. She didn't ask for money this time. That's different. Maybe she really means it. Or maybe, I said quietly, she's just learned not to mention it yet. The fear gnawed at me. Could I risk letting her back into my life only to be hurt again? That night, I sat at my desk with a pen and a blank sheet of paper. I stared at it for hours, unsure what to write. Part of me wanted to open my arms completely, to forgive and forget. Another part wanted to protect the fragile peace I had built. Finally, I began. Dear Clarissa, thank you for your letter. Reading your words broke my heart, but it also gave me hope. I cannot tell you how much I have longed to hear you say what you wrote. I do love you, and I always will. But love cannot survive without respect. That is something we must rebuild, slowly, together. I will not talk about wills or money. If you want me in your life, it must be for me, not for what I can give. If you can accept that, then yes, I want to try again. Love, Mom. When I sealed the envelope and placed it in the mailbox the next morning, my heart felt both lighter and heavier. Lighter, because I had finally opened the door a crack. Heavier, because I knew how fragile this door was. Days turned into a week before I heard back. One evening, as I sat in the garden painting the fading autumn leaves, my phone buzzed. A text from Clarissa. Thank you for writing back. I understand. Can we meet for coffee? Just to talk? I stared at the message for a long time. My fingers hovered over the keys before I finally typed. Yes. Let's try. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, hope flickered inside me, fragile, like a candle flame that could be snuffed out with the slightest breath. But I knew one thing for certain. Trust, once broken, would take far more than words to rebuild. In the end, love is a choice, not an obligation. The morning I was set to meet Clarissa for coffee, my stomach churned with nerves. I stood in front of the mirror far too long, adjusting my scarf, brushing my hair back, reminding myself to breathe. It had been months since I had seen her face to face, and though her letter had softened the wall between us, it hadn't torn it down. When I arrived at the cafe, she was already there, sitting by the window with her hands wrapped around a mug. She looked up as I approached, and for a moment, I saw the little girl who used to wave to me from the school bus, her eyes lighting up when she spotted me. "Hi, Mom," she said softly. "Hi, sweetheart," I replied, my voice unsteady. We sat across from each other, the silence stretching, filled with years of unspoken words. Finally, Clarissa broke it. "I don't expect you to forgive me overnight," she said, her eyes glistening. "But I want to try. I want to show you that I can be better." I studied her face, searching for traces of the woman who had let Travis's cruelty go unchecked. But what I saw instead was exhaustion, humility, and something I hadn't seen in years: sincerity. "I want to try too," I admitted. "But it has to be on different terms this time. No talk of money, no talk of inheritance, only love, only respect." She nodded quickly. "I understand. I don't care about the money anymore, Mom. I just care about you." Something in me dared to believe her. Over the following weeks, we met more often. Sometimes for lunch, sometimes for walks in the park. At first, our conversations were cautious, circling around safe topics: work, the weather, books we were reading. But little by little, we peeled back the layers. She apologized again. Not just in words, but in actions, listening without interrupting. Defending me when others tried to dismiss me. Showing up without expecting anything in return. One Saturday, she came to my house for dinner. Julia and Mason were there too, and for the first time, the worlds I had built collided. Clarissa watched as Mason tugged at my sleeve, calling me Nana. And instead of jealousy or bitterness, she smiled. "He adores you," she said quietly. "And I adore him," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. Later that evening, as we all sat around the table eating pie, I realized my life had come full circle. I hadn't lost everything, I had gained something new. A daughter who was learning to rebuild, a friend who had become like family, and a little boy who had filled the emptiest parts of my heart. For the first time, I didn't feel torn between the past and the future. I was living in the present, surrounded by love, imperfect, fragile, but real. One night, weeks later, Clarissa and I sat on my porch as the stars glittered above us. "Mom," she said softly, "I don't deserve your forgiveness. But thank you for giving me another chance." I reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "Forgiveness isn't about deserving, Clarissa. It's about choosing. And I'm choosing to forgive, not just for you but for me." She leaned against my shoulder, and for the first time in years, I felt the warmth of my daughter's love without the shadow of greed looming behind it. The will remained unchanged. My decision stood. My estate would go to those who had treated me with kindness, respect, and love without conditions. Clarissa knew this now, and she accepted it. Our relationship was no longer tied to money, it was tied to something far more valuable. In the months that followed, the three circles of my life, Clarissa, Julia, and Mason, began to blend. We shared meals, holidays, laughter. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. As I watched Mason run through the yard one sunny afternoon, Julia laughing beside him and Clarissa smiling from the porch, I realized something profound. I had been called dead weight, but I was anything but. I was alive. I was loved. And I was strong. And at last, I knew my story wasn't one of loss, but of reclaiming dignity and choosing love on my own terms.